and welcome to Conversations with Dr. Kohli. I'm your host, Dr. Kohli, Associate Adjunct Professor in the Cardiology Divisions at Duke University and Johns Hopkins University, and founder and medical director of Cherry Creek Heart in Aurora, Colorado. And today, I'm so delighted to be joined by my colleague, Dr. John Osborne, who's the co-founder and Chief Medical and Scientific Officer of Clear Cardio in Dallas, Texas. You can learn more about Clear Cardio at www.clearcardio.com. Welcome, John. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me back.
So, John, today I want to talk about a citizens petition submitted by healthy women in April of 2024 to the FDA. And I thought this was really provocative because it really does represent the citizens making a change, making an appeal to the FDA and actually changing what the FDA does. So essentially what the healthy women put in the petition and asked the FDA to do was to really remedy what they called a widespread misimpression of the fact that fibrates have been believed, erroneously so, to improve cardiovascular outcomes. And what they wanted the FDA to do was to put in the newest data, including the prominent data, and also to send out a letter to all healthcare providers telling them about this label change. Now, the FDA responded really positively, so I want you to summarize for me kind of what the key takeaways were from what the FDA actually did. And then what's your reaction to all this?
Yeah. So I have to give credit to the FDA. Our government is working in this particular situation. So I have to give credit because they really did a fantastic review of all of the prior trials that looked at the role of fibrates, either alone or with statins being the foundational drug for LDL lowering. Of course, we have lots of other drugs that treat LDL nowadays, but also included with that a trial that came out just a couple of years ago called the Prominent trial that trialed a novel fibrate. These are drugs we typically use to lower triglycerides and raise HDL to see if that would lower cardiovascular events in a very high-risk population. These patients all had diabetes. They all had moderately elevated triglycerides. They all had lower HDLs. And this is nearly 10,500 people, double-blinded, randomized, prospective trial over 3 years, which showed absolutely no cardiac benefit. 96% of these patients were on background statin therapy as is appropriate. Zero benefit. The event curves were completely superimposable as we talk about it. No difference by adding.
What's really interesting about that is what you pointed out, which is that the deck was stacked in the favor. Like you had the highest risk patients, the ones that we thought would have benefited, low HDLs, high triglycerides, and there was no benefit despite the fact that it reduced triglycerides.
Right. If you were going to bet on this, the people in Vegas would say this trial's got to work.
That's right. I would have bet money on it.
I would have too. I'm glad I don't bet. But yeah, so I agree. It was a trial that was very well designed. I know the PIs behind it. They're great trialists. You would think with that population, that size of population, that follow-up, meeting all of those different criteria where we go, this is a high-risk population where a fibrate would be perfect. They have high triglycerides. Let's knock them down. They're already on good statin therapy. The LDLs were well controlled. Complete bunkus, no benefit whatsoever. In fact, what they showed was no cardiovascular benefit, no benefit for heart attack, strokes, revascularization, angina, more cardiovascular mortality, but they did show harm. There was an increased risk of kidney issues. There was an increased risk of some liver issues. And also notably, and we had seen this in prior fibrate trials before, an increased risk of venous thromboembolic disease, or VTE, or in other words, blood clots in the legs and lungs. So that those were increased by roughly twofold if you used a fibrate on top of statin in that high-risk population. So definitely words of caution, but no evidence of benefit for cardiovascular endpoints, for heart endpoints.
Well, and I think it's really nice that the FDA has now actually incorporated the increased risk of venous thromboembolism into the label change. And they've also said, again, and re-emphasized that the fibrates are not associated with any proven cardiovascular benefit. I thought it was interesting that they actually turned down the idea of sending a letter to healthcare providers to inform them of this, because we know that when they had done a label change in the past, the message didn't really get out. So why do you think these types of conversations that we're having today are so important in these citizens petition to the FDA? And why do you think this message needs to get out?
Yeah, I think if this were a baseball game, I think this is a strong triple, right? I wish they would have gotten the message out. I wish they would have sent out the letter to the docs, really not just to make the changes in the labels. And by the way, this is across all fibrates, Gemfibrozil, which has been approved for a long, long time, the Tricor and fenofibrates, all of the fibrates will have this in their label. I wish they had
I do too.
uh, done that letter to the doc as they do, because we do know literally millions of people in the U.S.
Yeah.
are on fibrates and statins for no benefit but documented harm. So I wish they had done that. That really would have made me feel much better. But unfortunately, still millions of people are, and we'll just have to keep getting the message out like we're doing today.
Yes, I love that. And, I don't know much about baseball, but I always do listen to my coach. So if I was a baseball player, I'm a healthcare provider, what should I do different? I know I still use fibrates for patients with triglycerides over 500, but what should I be doing different for those patients in that moderate risk range where the trigs are less than 500, but obviously they have cardiovascular risk? Should I be using the fibrates?
The data says no. We have not a shred of evidence that shows benefit. We do have evidence of harm. And as I always think of my patients, as I'm their advocate, I'm always thinking, what's the potential benefit? What's the potential harm? And here we have a situation where the harm is evident, the benefit is not. So in cardiology, we have these different classifications of therapy, right? Class 1A means it's standard of care. Everybody should be doing it unless there's a really, really good reason not to. Class 2, maybe possibly. Class 3 is there is harm.
Yeah.
So this is a class 3 indication. So you want to remember the ones because that's standard of care. You want to remember the threes, do not go there. The twos, there's some shuffle room there. But this is an important, number 3 category. Do not use these drugs. No evidence of benefit, and not just no harm, but evidence of harm, no evidence of benefit. So stay away there. And I think clinically in this patient population, we do, though, have very good data about other adjunctive lipid modifying tools, drugs we can use. And really, that's icosapent icosapent has been tested in a population very similar to prominent, but somewhat smaller. But did show another 25% reduction in major adverse cardiac events in patients on statins at high risk, either patients with diabetes or known cardiovascular disease. Basically, everybody was on statins, well-controlled LDL, modestly elevated triglycerides. There we saw a home run, a grand slam, if you will. We got 4 runs off that. The batter brought everybody home, and huge win there. And this data's been around for a number of years now, published back in 2019, early 2019, endorsed by every cardiovascular and metabolic and diabetes organizations out there that issues guidelines, even including the kidney docs, and included also included in guidelines recommended in over 60 international guidelines throughout the world across diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So lots of great data for something that does work, unless we still have millions of people on fibrates for an indication that we have great data showing it doesn't work. So
I'll say a couple of things. First, we're really getting deep into those sports analogies here. So I have to try to keep up. Sports is not my forte. But secondly, most importantly, I want to emphasize something you said, which is that we all took an oath as healthcare providers, the Hippocratic Oath, which is first do no harm. And the fact that despite years and years of data, and despite the FDA already having changed the label not once but twice, we continue to do something that doesn't provide benefit and potentially harms our patients. So I know that if I was a patient and I had moderately elevated triglycerides, this is not the drug I would reach for fibrates. I would want to reach for risk-reducing drugs, like you said, statins, icosapent. We even talk now about going upstream and treating the diabetes and treating, the obesity with agents like GLP-1 receptor agonists. So many tools in our toolbox that actually work. So what should be my takeaway if I was a patient? And what does this really mean for me in terms of my treatment choices? And how should I think about it if I'm already taking a fibrate for cardiovascular disease? What should I do?
Right. As always, talk to your doctor, right? However, I would say if you fall in that scenario where you're taking a fibrate, it's not because your triglycerides are super high. It's because it's given to you for cardiovascular lowering. We have no evidence behind that. Please, please, please talk to your doctor whether that is right for you.
And I love that. And I've actually been de-escalating a lot of my patients because we know they've been taking fenofibrate for the last 20 years. And 20
Right.
years ago, maybe it was the right medication to start. But now at this point, it's not the right medicine to start unless your triglycerides are over 500. And in those select cases, when you do use it in combination with a statin, not just to treat cardiovascular risk, but to treat the number because the trigs are elevated, you're trying to get them down to reduce risk of pancreatitis. You want to make sure you look for drug-drug interactions, keep a close eye on those liver function tests, keep a really close eye on the renal function, as well as the risk of myopathy and other side effects. So
Right.
really using it in this kind of moderate risk population shouldn't happen anymore. I would even go so far as to say it's medical malpractice because it's been made clear that it causes harm. But I think there's still more work that needs to be done. And I think, of course, part of that, as we've discussed today, is education. But what else do you feel are the residual gaps in this space when it comes to how we're maximally reducing and managing our patients' cardiovascular risk?
Yeah, I so heartily agree with you. We have so many proven effective tools. Let's really advance all of those because those clearly do work. They add clear benefit. All of them play nicely together in the same sandbox. And let's really advance those. And that includes, obviously, all the wonderful LDL lowering drugs we have. We've got some new stuff that'll be here soon. The ones we have are remarkable. The stuff in the pipeline is amazing. Incredible drugs for weight loss, cardiovascular reduction, et cetera, as you know, with the GLP-1s and, of course, the SGLT2s in our patients with diabetes or chronic kidney disease or heart failure. So we have so many highly effective and proven therapies that we can use and use together and layer all those benefits on top of one another to further ratchet the risk of cardiovascular events, strokes, heart attacks, kidney damage, kidney failure. And also, too, I got to say, since we now have the new hypertension guidelines from August, also emphasizing lowering blood pressure, not related to triglycerides, but lowering blood pressure, huge benefit. Not just heart disease and heart failure and stroke, but also dementia too. So that's kind of new news out there as well. Not in the lipid space, but again, we have so many proven effective tools. Let's really advance those. And it's time for us to give up some of the blankies, the binkies, if you will, like fenofibrates that we thought worked. In fact, if you look at the data, you mentioned, 20 years, there is no data published in the 21st century. We're 25 years into it that
Yeah.
shows fibrates work for cardiovascular risk reduction, but have proven harm.
I think you made such an important point there, John, which is that we really need to talk about treating the risk, not treating the number. Because prominent and other trials have showed us that even if you treat that number, you treat those triglycerides, you don't end up reducing their risk. And I really sort of now start to focus on what I call cardiorenal outcomes, thinking about cardiovascular kidney metabolic syndrome, which we know 90% of America already has stage 1 CKM. Stage 0 being no risk factors at all, at stage 1 being already at risk for it. So I think we just need to take a step back and say, we're not so fixated on numbers, even though numbers help us on a day-to-day basis with blood pressure, with A1C, with LDL lowering to get to where we need to. But really at the end of the day, we want to think about the bigger picture, keeping them alive longer, reducing MIs, reducing strokes, reducing heart failure. And to that end, as you said, we have so much to offer. So thank you, John. This has been a scintillating conversation.
Always a pleasure.
Yes, I'm really, really excited that the citizens petition has actually prompted a tangible change with the FDA. I think that portends really well
Yeah.
for people saying, hey, let's make a difference. If you see something, say something, and perhaps the FDA will listen. And I really do hope that this message gets out to everybody out there. They start to change their clinical practice, not just hear the message, but actually implement changes. Because as you pointed out, it's been 25 years coming. And so I know I'm going to be making sure that I get this message out to my APPs and other practice providers as well. Any last words before I
No, I think it's fantastic. And again, kudos to the grassroots for making the effort and really making the FDA review the data and really come out very unequivocally, I think. I wish they'd sent out the letter to the docs, but very unequivocally, really just don't go there for the vast majority of people and don't go there for cardiovascular risk reduction.
Those are perfect words. Just don't go there. I love it. All right.
Don't
Well,
go
thank
there.
you again, John, for your time.
Always a
A
pleasure.
great conversation. And thank you all for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Kohli. We hope you found this episode interesting, enjoyable, and practice changing. Until next time.
Take care.